in the past, a person would get a diagnosis of autism and they would be told all of the things that their child would never do.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
that's an imprint, right?
Right,
That's a
right.
vibrational imprint.
Hmm.
And even if that still happens, Victor, and I just will say this to the parents listening, even if that still happens, when you step out of that experience with that doctor or that therapist or whoever told you that, again, can we put a question mark around that? Can we just open ourselves back up to actually what might be possible, right?
Hmm.
Instead of what somebody, some authority figure just said is impossible.
Right.
Because
Hey, everybody. Today I have the great pleasure of interviewing Suzy Miller. Hopefully, you have already listened to Suzy Miller on the Telepathy Tapes. She's remarkable there, so please go listen to the Telepathy Tapes and you will hear her there. Of course, she's been doing work with autistic children for decades. So she has a very deep background, originally as a speech pathologist working with children, and now she really works as an integration specialist. You'll hear her explain that. Again, I mentioned she's a key part of the Telepathy Tapes. She has a book called Awesomeism, which is a very cool title. I love it. She has workshops online that you can check out at her website. See the links below to her website. You definitely want to check out her site. A lot of cool stuff there. She has like a workshop like on the role of autism in human evolution. Absolutely love this. Just the title alone says so much. Um, in this interview, we talk about a lot of different things. Basically, I'm trying to get her out there so you can understand who she is and what she does, because I think she's a very, very important part of what is happening in human evolution right now, and what is happening with autistic children and what we can do to help autistic children. So you're going to learn a lot of things that maybe you never thought about, what is possible with autistic children, what is possible for them. And as you know, right, I have my own podcast, a working group on solutions for autistic children, how to help get them to engage, get them to be able to engage better with us, because we have a hard time entering their world, and some of us are learning how to do that more and more. But we can also help them engage with us more. A child that is non-communicative does not have to always be that way. They've basically just been poisoned, so we just can aid them more with detox, aid them more with nutrition. And you'll hear Suzy and I speak about this. So now me, right? My background, I'm a nutritionist. I do energy healing. I'm really into quantum physics, chemistry, biology, as many of you know. Most of my life, I've been a computer scientist. And so energy and everything is, I'm very excited to talk about these topics. And more recently, I've really put a lot of focus on the autistic children, because I see them as helping to really lead the way in our evolution, because humans are always evolving and we're evolving in ways that might surprise you. So without further ado, let's jump to the interview with Suzy. Or first, let's jump to some clips, some highlights that will whet your appetite for the full interview. So here is Suzy Miller.
so I want to address two different things here. I want to definitely address the supplements and the supply chain and why that is so critically important. But because I was talking so much about telepathy, because I mean, when you hear this, you're blown away. I mean, it's amazing, it's wonderful. But the challenge is if we only fixate on that, then we kind of look at their gifts, but we don't look at some of the things that are their challenges in the human experience. Yeah, it's opened a level of curiosity that once you open, you can't put the lid back on that. So,
Right, right, right. It's really incredible. And they did a really good job with backing it up with science, and
oh, amazing. Yeah.
it's wonderful.
And Kai's an amazing storyteller. So,
Yes.
it's like it's just so engaging to be part of that process. And the way she's, expressed that out in the world is really beautiful.
Yes, it's very, very nice. Yeah. Maybe we should start with speaking about your new book.
Well, we can do that. It's believe me, it's like I just finally got the whole outline laid out and those kinds of things. But yeah, I have a feeling that some pretty fun things can happen, with this population and with collective human consciousness in general. So
Nice.
anyway, that's what's kind of going into the new book.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, and I definitely wanted to mention, and I will mention to people about your Awesomism book. So, a couple of things that I wanted to touch with you on. Of course, just to introduce you, as an integration specialist and allow you to explain a bit about that. Definitely want to give a shout out to your role and participation in the telepathy tapes
Yeah.
as to increase people's awareness of the telepathy tapes
Yeah,
as
for
well as
sure.
you.
Yep.
And of course, you also have a workshop on autism in human evolution. So
Yep.
I would love to speak about that a little bit. And then of real particular interest to me and what we spoke about before, and maybe what is a really good thing to start out with, the fact that supplements or food or anything, autistic children will pick up on the energies that have been
Yes.
absorbed by those things,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
So this has always been a very big thing for me, and another reason why I'm extremely strict about supplements.
Right.
And I like to explain to people that we have to understand the whole supply chain.
Right.
What's going on with this product? Is it
Right.
really contributing to the world, or is it
Yes.
more detrimental, et cetera? But you are the person, and we spoke about this briefly before, because you mentioned to me that,
Uh-huh.
yeah, the autistic children will pick up
A hundred
on,
percent.
right.
Yeah.
So it's not just me that
Yeah.
says
No.
these things, and so of course with your background, you have a lot of experience with the energetic realm or the spiritual realm, with so many different words we can throw around. So let's start with first. I think you explaining what you do as an integration specialist will introduce people to all these terms and ideas. So, Suzy Miller, please explain to us what you do as this integration specialist.
Right. So, yeah, an integration specialist is a profession that I kind of came by simply because one of the first kids that I ever worked with basically told me, unbeknownst to me, that I was there to put his light body back into his physical body. And that the
Mm,
reason that he was showing up as with the characteristics of autism was because the essence of him or the light body of him and the physical form of him were in two completely different frequency bands, you might say. And so, for whatever reason, in that moment, he thought that I was capable of putting those two back together. And I found out over time that indeed that was a skill set that I had. So basically what an integration specialist is just that. I look at the essence of the human being, you might say the soul blueprint or the template of that person. And then I look at what's going on in their physical world, their physical reality, the emotional state around them. And we start just bringing those two worlds closer and closer together. And this isn't me necessarily doing this. This is me connecting with the part of the kids who know exactly what they need in order to make these two worlds go together. And I'm just a really good listener, and
okay.
and I don't negate anything that they might say. So, for instance, let's say you have a soul who's come here with as a very high frequency being, but they come into a world where it's filled with separation, it's filled with divisiveness and
Mm,
division, it's filled with toxicity, physical, mental, emotional.
right.
So you've got this highly refined being that's trying to work his or her um, essence into a form that doesn't really match that energy. And
Mhm.
so, really, a lot of what they will say is it could be anything from this is what I need physically, this is what I need mentally, this is what I need emotionally, this is what I need in the environment around me, so that it just feels more comfortable to be integrated into a body. And the more information they give me, um, and I either give that information to their parents or sometimes they ask me to support them energetically, where we're just making changes vibrationally. however you slice it, we're just bringing that awareness into being so that those two realms or realities can go together.
Oh, wonderful. So you're almost like a translator or a bridge to help the caregivers facilitate what needs to be done in many cases. Make
Right.
them more comfortable.
Yeah. And I think, so many parents and professionals that work with kids diagnosed with autism, they look at this population through the lens of, there's something that needs to be fixed, that
Mm,
they're broken and something needs to be changed. What we don't very often see is who that bigger part of them is. And so a lot of people just, nobody's taught anybody how to acknowledge the essence of somebody. And
mm,
if we start by acknowledging the essence of somebody, the places where they're already um, doing something that is supportive of themselves. So a very basic example is a lot of people come and they want their children to verbally communicate. And so, it's just something that, of course, every parent wants to hear their child speak.
right.
And so there's nothing wrong with that desire. But if we go at it from the vantage point that, you're broken or something's wrong that needs to be fixed, and we start adding energy to that, instead of looking at all the ways in which they're already communicating. They may be
Yes.
spellers, they may be communicating through their behaviors, they
Right.
might be doing all kinds of other ways, but we have a tendency, because most of humanity has been very conditioned to
Yes.
what's wrong, to separation energy. We very rarely pay attention to what's working. But if we look at that from the get-go, if we really start training ourselves to kind of go, you know what? Last week he was banging his head up against the wall, and this week he's saying he wants, a certain thing to eat. Well,
Mhm.
that's improvement. That's another
Right.
degree of communication. And when we put our focus on that, we create more of that.
Right. Focusing, feeding the positive things and only
Yes.
positive energy.
And
Yeah.
feeding the capacity.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I love that perspective. And I think it's very tricky for people. Right? Like you're saying there, our paradigm on everything is always very negative and attack, attack, attack,
Mhm.
rather than just supporting. So like for me, I boil everything down to just we just need better nutrition and we just need to detox. That's it.
Yeah.
So I really don't like discussions about like, oh, well, there's genetic issues. I'm like, no, 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 no. Because
Mhm.
for me, that's a very negative focus. I was
Right.
like, we're all genetically different. So that's
Yeah.
irrelevant. That's just taking a negative paradigm, a negative perspective. So I don't care about the genetics.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter. It's just everyone's path is unique anyway,
Right.
right? So
Right.
we just feed into the positive, like you're saying, and take advantage of all that. And then that just creates a positive momentum.
Well, and anywhere where we release stress from the system, whether that's neurological, biological, psychological,
Mm,
we're elevating the system's ability to start to support itself, to start to heal itself, to start to integrate. But again, if we're constantly focused on what's not working, what needs to be
mm.
fixed. We have a tendency, especially with these kids, because they're so energetically sensitive, that
Right.
even when we don't say it to them, you know, I mean, they're capable of reading our thoughts, they're capable of reading our
Right.
emotions. They know what's going on within our genetics, they know what's going on within our bodies. So they know what the pitfalls are.
Right.
Their soul chose to come under these circumstances. And to me, it's like, do we make that experience easier for them or do we make it more difficult for them?
Mm.
And the easier we make it for them, the more they start showing up, the more they start moving from non-speakers to spellers and spellers to speakers, and the more their bodies start to regulate. But this is all, I like to think about it as imprint or yeah, imprinting vibrational information.
Okay.
Are we broadcasting, you know, fear, worry, concern, Are we broadcasting that there's something wrong? Or where are we broadcasting, hey, you're different. You have different requirements than maybe other people. And I'm curious about that. I'd like to learn more about that.
Mm,
What can you teach me about that? How can you get information to me in ways that I might not have considered before? I mean,
mm,
this is where parents say that they can really see that their children have opened them up to their own spiritual journey or their own awakening,
right.
right? When
Yes.
we just start not assuming that we know how somebody else is supposed to be, but start having curiosity about the way they are and start supporting and facilitating that.
Yes. And then they end up becoming leaders for us in that way,
Oh,
right? Right?
absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
wonderful. I would like to I would like to give kind of a shallow mechanistic, not analogy, but just to explain to people that, I love that you said like this idea of imprinting, these energies. And we see that quantum physics explains this very well. And we see like wearables and devices and containers for water where we are now imprinting
Yes.
all of these good energies, and
Mhm.
there's so many different things out there. So if someone wants to, if someone has a hard time with a spiritual or nebulous discussion about this, there are these very physical things where we scientifically can see the results of
Yeah.
using these devices or wearables, etc., that have been imprinted with good energy.
Yes.
It has a very big effect in the physical world. It is
Yeah.
real, right?
It absolutely is real. And it's funny because over time, I've worked with different people who have created different devices and different kinds of technologies and things like
Mm,
that. And at one point, there was one technology that we put into a space, and the the child diagnosed with autism felt great in that space. The parent started feeling sick. She started feeling nauseous. She started feeling overwhelmed. And I said, okay, well, now we just flipped the dynamics. Typically, we're asking these children to come into our world, come into our imprinted environments, you might say, whatever they're imprinted with. And then we wonder why they get so stressed out by doing that. But
mm.
when we reverse it and we create an environment that's great for them, we find out how uncomfortable it is to move
Yes.
into a new environment. And, to your point, Victor, we're just so conditioned to pay attention to the negative.
Hmm.
We're so conditioned to pay attention to what's not working because we think if we pay attention to it, somehow we can fix it. It kind of gives us a false sense of security, you might say. But what's fascinating to me is, I mean, it's just like if I were to say to you every single day, you're magnificent, you're wonderful, you're so good at what you do, you're going to rise to that occasion, right? If I tell you you're stupid and you don't know anything and you're not a good communicator, right? We watch this in preschoolers and typically developing preschoolers. You tell a preschooler every day, all day, one or either one of those, and you can watch their body literally become that. And I used to train preschool teachers back before I was working with kids on the spectrum all the time. And you could tell the kids in the classroom who had been just beaten down by
Mm,
certain broadcasts. And it's a whole energy. We and most people will broadcast something really heavy to a child when that's been broadcasted to them.
right,
Right?
right.
And that's where this just continues to go on. But when that's a neurotypically developing child. But when you have a child who has the neurology of somebody who has a diagnosis of autism, that right hemisphere of their brain is like wide open on high alert all the time.
Hmm.
That's that intuitive, receptive, um, almost like access to the unseen is through that right hemisphere. Well, now they're picking up all of these nuances The challenging part about that is if we're always broadcasting heavy energy, they're picking that up and they're making that mean something about them. But the
Mm,
great thing about them being so sensitive is if we wake up in the morning and kind of go, what would joy look like today? What would like surprise and delight look like today? What would regulation in the body look
mm,
like today? The more we start thinking those thoughts and being curious about those questions, these kids are so sensitive, they pick it up in a nanosecond and
wow.
they reflect that back to us.
Wow, that's, I love this idea as a technique, this idea of us remaining curious, because and I say this often when I'm speaking to like the best scientists in the world, even. I just did a second interview with Dr. Stephanie Seneff, and during that, and she's, a world leading scientist at MIT, but we talk about how we know nothing.
Exactly.
So we should proceed with this curiosity that you're speaking of,
Mhm.
because not only does it keep us properly grounded and in a proper paradigm,
Yeah.
but it's a positive energy and it's helping to draw out um, the autistic children
Mhm.
and enabling us to even be led by them,
A hundred
right?
percent.
And so,
And when we go into any experience with them, or quite frankly, anybody else, assuming that we already know who they are or know what
mm,
they're about. I mean, I had somebody not too long ago in an interview announce me as or present me as an expert in this field. And I started to laugh. I'm like, these kids are the expert in the field because they're the ones that are living this experience. I have a lot of experience with them, but that by no means, I mean, I've been doing this for 26 years now. I'm
mm,
still learning every single day because if we do go in with curiosity and we don't assume that we know everything because we simply have a certain lens that we see it through, these kids can start showing us parts of ourselves that we didn't even know existed. And that's
right,
to me when things get really fun.
right.
I don't want to know what I've always known. I want to know
Mm.
what I don't know, both about other people and about myself. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic, right? The journey of life. Well,
Yeah.
you're an amazing ambassador for these kids. Like that's I think a great word. Like, and I mentioned like a bridge. Because you're able to communicate so much of what they can't communicate in our language,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really great. And so people like you are very difficult to come by. We in all of these different areas and fields. For example, in animal communication. I love Anna Brettenbach because for me, she's one of the best ambassadors, very clear, down to earth, like the normal people can
Yes.
relate to her, right?
Yes.
So it's really important to have people like yourself that can connect to them and then bring us this information in a way that, maybe we're able to accept it a little better because of the way you're delivering it to us. And so I really appreciate what you do. And of course, I discovered you on the telepathy tapes.
Yeah.
You were incredible there. And then that season, those 10 episodes that they put out last year, incredible insight. I love it. It's just really amazing. And I think more people need to listen to the telepathy tapes and get exposed to what you are talking about and what you're doing, what you were doing before the telepathy tapes, what you did in the telepathy tapes, and what you're still doing.
Yes.
So I think it's
Yeah.
very eye-opening for people.
It was so amazing for the telepathy tapes to come out because I think one of the best things that it's done is it's really opened people's curiosity.
Yeah.
Like we were just saying, I mean, I've heard so many new clients say, well, I wasn't exactly sure that my child could be telepathic or that I could be telepathic, but
Mm.
because that went out in the world, I started questioning things that I didn't question before. I started inviting my child to demonstrate that to me, right?
Oh.
And so this is brilliant. I mean, when we have a whole new question that's coming to the surface, we're not just assuming anymore. I think that that's one of the greatest gifts that telepathy tapes has given humanity. It's really opened up yeah, it's opened a level of curiosity that once you open, you can't put the lid back on that. So,
Right, right, right. It's really incredible. And they did a really good job with backing it up with science and
oh, amazing.
it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
And Kai's an amazing storyteller. So,
Yes.
it's like it's just so engaging to be part of that process. And the way she's, expressed that out in the world is really beautiful.
Yes, it's very, very nice. Yeah, so I really appreciate the work she's doing there. And then she had another one of my heroes on there, Rupert Sheldrake.
Oh, I know. I love him.
I've been following him for 40 years. And, but 40 years ago, we couldn't talk about, morphic fields and, and all that stuff. But now, wow. So I was like, oh, this is too perfect,
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think it's a step-by-step process out of that kind of separation energy, that old conditioned way in which we were, yeah, almost again imprinted to have division, within ourselves, within humanity. And when we're talking about morphic fields, we're
mm,
talking about the interconnectedness of all things. Now
yes,
we're talking about oneness.
yes, yes.
And as far as I can tell after, my time with these kids, their souls really are coming from a field of oneness. They literally are almost like I like to say it's like a new species, but they look like us. They, sound like us in many ways. But the other side of it is that they see all, they know all, they feel all because
Mm,
they're functioning in that field of oneness.
right,
And
right.
I like to make it really practical, Victor. It's like, if the more we're functioning in oneness, of course it makes sense that you can know how somebody else feels without them telling you that,
Right.
or that you could maybe be connected beyond time and space.
Mm,
Or that's what's any different between that and a morphic field,
right,
and a
right.
morphic field being impacted by, somebody halfway across the world, adding energy to that field. Yeah, it
Yes,
grows.
yes, right, right. How we're all connected. Yeah, it's really wonderful that work, and it's interesting how, like you see, he's been doing this for so many decades, and only now not only now, but just more and more getting onto the big stage, or at least getting more and more acceptance as we just start to kind of wake up. And right, and you mentioned the evolution. Like, I think people don't realize we all have this potential. Each individual can evolve within this lifetime,
Yes,
which is magnificent. And that's one of the things I'd like to people to grasp is that because we think of evolution like, okay, well, the next generation. It's like,
right.
no, it's right now. You know, right? We
Well,
all
and
have these.
especially in this lifetime, we're in a much bigger cycle of human evolution, and
Mm,
how we each evolve within that individually is part of our own process, right? But that we are evolving, that's really not up to us anymore. It's like there's bigger forces at work. So all of humanity is moving, all of humanity is shifting and changing.
right.
So it's just a matter of, are we in resistance to
Mm,
that shift and change? Or again, are we curious about it? And if we're curious about it, man, all kinds of things start to open up, and we start to see ourselves and these kids and other people that we're interacting with through a very
mm.
different lens. That's exciting to me. That's really
Yes,
exciting.
yes. Oh, it really is. You reminded me, I'll give you a funny example. So I've always been very open-minded, very spiritual. As a wellness practitioner, I always recommended all different kinds of energy healing to people. I was like, look, I can explain to you with quantum physics why this is real. It does work. You should do it. But
Yeah.
I never viewed myself. I always thought it was like special abilities until
Yes.
I read the Emotion Code, Dr. Brad.
Oh, great.
And he emphasizes that we can all do muscle testing. We can all do this. And I was like, you know what? I need to do this because I need to change my perspective. And what's really funny is even though I had the conscious belief, the intellectual belief,
Right.
the 6 month certification took me 9 months because, and I got help from other people. I did some energy healing to help remove
Yeah.
my unconscious negative beliefs that were blocking me
Right.
even though I intellectually believed in it. And I love the emotion code. So, that I became a practitioner. And so it's with everything you're talking about, all these other like gifts
Hmm.
and the things they do, we all have the ability to kind of join them if we choose to follow, right? Remain.
That's it. And I think that those all of those gifts, all of that awareness, that's innate to who we
Mm,
all are.
right.
And I always liken it to that's who we are in truth. That's what's possible. And then we have layered upon us all of this energy of conforming or of
Yes.
fitting in or of
Mm,
belief systems that, and not just, in this lifetime, but throughout all of our incarnations, if one believes in those, it's like all of those incarnations, we've been dumbed down, you might say, or layered upon. So, doesn't it make sense that as we start, like you were saying, I was doing some energy work to help release, your gift was already there. It's already there. You're just having to pull off the layers
mm,
that don't allow that to be exposed. And one of the things that the kids said recently to me is if we look at them right now, like let's say through the telepathy tapes or through this big exposure that they now have, that they're telepathic and they read minds and they do all these things. If the kids were saying that if we look at that and if we assume that that's only them, then we'll have missed the message that they came to bring,
right.
which is no, we're showing you all of these capacities. We're also showing you how difficult it is to have these capacities when we're mired in conditioning. So let's get the conditioning up and out. Let's be curious. Let's have question marks around things instead of tried and true, this is the way it is, because that's when we solidify things. Let's just start being more curious. And then what you start noticing is some of these places and spaces where we've said, no, this is the way it is. This is who
Mm,
I am. This is who my dad was, my mother was. This is who
mm,
I am. This is what my generations or my lineage has been like. Big question mark. Is that true? I mean, is that true?
right.
Because I'm really beginning to see how we reinforce that truth instead of reveal what is actually true, which is we've got capacities every which way but loose. We just
Yeah.
conditioned out of them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Things that people have never even dared to imagine.
right,
Right. So, I mean, and even me, I mean, I'm as open-minded and I'm a geek. I've been into this since I was a teenager, a young teenager, but
right.
I'm still so shocked and surprised by things I learn. I'm always learning.
Yes. Well, that's because it's ever expanding. Me too.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's certain places in our lives where I can be completely open to the abilities of children diagnosed with autism, let's say.
Mm,
I can be completely aware that, that if that collective tells me that they can now be more embodied, I completely believe it. That kind of, but then there's other things in our life where it might be more deeply embedded or it might have more energy of, I'm just going to say hurt or wounding around it.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
And so we don't always like to go to those places and put question marks around it. We like to
Mm,
feel safe around that. And
right,
so we say, no, that's the way it is. So that's what I have to look out for. No, it's all energy. It's
right.
all either an imprint that we let unfold or it's an imprint that we uphold. And
Mm,
either way, bigger picture doesn't care. You can do it whatever you want with the energy. But the more we kind of put question marks around things, the more things have a tendency to reveal themselves.
mhm.
More of who we are reveals
Right.
itself.
And I guess we'll get more of that feeling of moving forward or progressing, right?
Yes.
That things are doing well, right?
Yes.
And we'll see more synchronicities and things like that.
Yeah, things literally lighten up.
Mm,
So we're not weighted down by, quite frankly, the thoughts and ideas and imprints of people that just came before us. Yeah.
right, right. It's interesting too, you're talking about the past. So when I've done this with my daughter, I explained to her when she was young, I was like, look, because when you're a kid or when you get into your teens, you start to think, you're trying to get away from the parents, right? You want to
Yeah,
put
yeah,
them in
of
a
course.
negative context. So it's very interesting. And she and I spoke a lot about this idea that, look, you can look back at the past
Mhm,
and you can see it all as negative,
mhm.
and that's just going to create negative momentum. Or you can look back at the past and focus only on the positive. And
Yeah.
you just
What did
imagine
it
you,
give you? Yeah,
yes, exactly. You focus on that, and now you create that momentum of all positive energy and just be grateful, like, oh my God, my
yeah,
parents were unbelievable.
yeah,
Right. And from one moment to the next, my parents were the most horrific, horrible creatures ever to exist, to wow, they were the
yeah.
greatest parents to ever exist. We have the ability to do that. We can change our past. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And, I say to people all the time, it's like, every person has whatever early childhood they have, and we perceive it through a particular lens.
Mm,
And I'm not saying that some people have not had horrific, you
right.
know,
Right.
early experiences. And a lot of these kids, honestly, have some pretty challenging experiences because people around them don't understand them. And that creates frustration and irritation. But the other side of it is I tell people I'm so grateful for my early childhood experiences and my past, because if I didn't have those, I wouldn't have been up and out of my body myself. I wouldn't have been disconnected from myself. I wouldn't have met these kids
Right.
where they're up and out of their bodies. I wouldn't have been able to hear their direction to come back into the body, which therefore I wouldn't have come back into mine. So
Mm.
it's like, I truly believe we set up both our successes and our challenges,
Oh, absolutely.
before we get here. And if we can look at it through that lens as quickly as possible, we don't have to say our parents were the best parents in the world, but we do have to acknowledge that maybe we, at a soul level, set up that growth for ourselves. And
Yes.
how amazing when we take that opportunity. And most of the people that I know who are out in the world creating big change in the world have had some challenges, to say the least. And as they work through those challenges, then they knew what they had to give.
Right. Oh, I agree 100% with you. And actually, we spoke previously. I'm not going to mention, I'm not going to drop any other names, but there's a few other people that are popping into my head as you're
Yeah.
saying this, because I feel exactly the same way. And we kind of made these decisions to come here. These challenges we knew would be necessary to help us develop.
Mhm.
And there's like every disaster is an opportunity. And
Yeah.
if, right, so if you have the right mindset, then you're able to take advantage of that opportunity. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And I mean, and we see it all the time, like at a very physical level. Let's say you have a natural disaster or an unnatural disaster in a community. We see the best of people when that community rallies together.
yes,
So it's
yes.
like it's it's opportunities for growth, right? It's not punishment. And I think that again, we've been so conditioned to see experiences as punishment.
Mm,
I'll even have a lot of, parents, professionals, whomever say, did I do something wrong? And that's why I have this experience with this
oh,
child. I'm like, number one, no.
right.
Maybe you've chosen to fast track yourself spiritually. Maybe you chose an incarnation that was going to be fairly challenging, so that you could start putting this positive energy into it. So that, and when parents ask me that too, I'm going, again, listen to the broadcast. Did I do something wrong to be the parent of this child? And I'm like,
Mm,
what if you did something right?
right. This is a
What
reward. This is a
What if you
gift.
did something right? What if there's a capacity within you that otherwise would not be come to fruition? And the number of people, Victor, that tell me that they opened spiritually because they had these children,
Hmm.
because their child is the beautiful child that they are with all the challenges and differences and everything. Uh, Everybody pretty much says, I took that opportunity and here I am on this journey to deepen within myself. And as I do that, guess what? My child shows up more
Mm,
doing that. It's like I, I think the bigger picture knows exactly what it's doing, you know,
Yes,
so we
absolutely.
can work with it instead of against it.
Right, absolutely. As you mentioned earlier, it's like, humanity is shifting as a whole.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah. And we're choosing the way we participate in that. Yeah,
exactly.
each individual can choose, but man, that shift is happening.
It is.
Yeah, yeah, that shift is
Yes.
happening. Yeah,
Yes.
it's so wonderful. So I want to interject something a little mechanistic.
Mhm.
Um, for me, so one of the challenges, so I've been hosting an autism podcast now, where
Oh,
I'm
nice.
focusing on autism solutions. But I'm also very careful about avoiding any negative connotations with this. So like the idea is like, no, they're not broken. There's no genetic issues. Um, but I do want to detox the children to
Yeah.
help them. So what the problem is actually with us that we are unable to communicate to them. So what we need to do is if we do detox them and enable them to, a lot of the children, they'll start to be able to verbalize, right?
Yep.
um, and then communicate to us more. And
Hmm.
so my focus is actually on that,
Yeah.
helping people. Look, there are things while emphasizing how wonderful, there's nothing wrong with the children, but we can help them to communicate better by just assisting them with detox, giving them better nutrition, etc. Um, and so I'd like to talk a little bit again, just when, and we mentioned earlier, the idea of when we choose products.
Yes.
We really, and I won't mention any product names or any technology names or anything like that here, but just the idea that it is really, really important that we understand or we investigate the entire supply chain of something, because all of the energy that goes into producing a product or a device or an environment is going to affect the child or the
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So that's because like again, for me, I'm so strict about that. And I try to explain to people, yes, sure, that the physical characteristics, the specifications, the transparency, all of this is so critical.
Hmm.
And I want to help people look at that. And then they will find more effective tools because we can improve their ability to communicate with us, verbally.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. So I want to address two different things here. I want to definitely address the supplements and the supply chain and why that is so critically important. But I also want to say that every single one of us has, you might say, our divine nature and our human nature. We have our capacities and we have our weaknesses.
Mm.
And so instead of like either or, and I know people they get a little bit skittish about saying that this population, they could use some support with their physical bodies, and
Right.
they really can. But it's just like if somebody had another diagnosis, any other diagnosis, we wouldn't just say, oh, that's because of that.
Right.
Oh, that they're like that because they're autistic. No,
Mm.
that's not true. They're like that, both their positive traits and their challenges. They're like that because they're like that, right? That's
Because
that's their makeup.
right, their persona, their personality, their
Yeah,
right.
that's the way they're wired. That's the way they're experienced. But we wouldn't take somebody that had a diagnosis of like cancer and say, we're not going to give you any physical support because you're so blessed to have cancer, right?
Right.
We wouldn't do
Right.
that. We do this with kids diagnosed on the spectrum all the time.
Mm.
And one of the things I noticed really early on, Victor, is like because I was talking so much about telepathy, because I mean, when you hear this, you're blown away. I mean, it's amazing, it's wonderful. But the challenge is if we only fixate on that, then we kind of look at their gifts, but we don't look at some of the things that are their challenges in the human experience.
Right.
And we have the capacity to address both and. Yeah.
Yes.
And so, what I noticed is the parents that would come to me initially, they don't anymore because they know I look at both and, but the parents that would come initially, it was all the spiritual part of things. And and they would negate the physicality,
Oh.
or it was all biomedical, it was all the physical. And
Mm.
then they would wonder why they weren't getting the best out of the kids through all the things that they were offering
Right.
because they weren't looking at the capacity,
Right.
right? And so to me, this is again us looking through the lens of separation, either or, instead of oneness. They're going, we need all of it. We need a boat.
Right. Holistic. It must be a holistic approach.
Exactly. And we all need that. So, so back to what you were saying about the supply chain. So if a parent comes to me and they say, okay, what does my child need? What would they benefit from?
Mm.
I'm looking at the spiritual, mental, emotional, physical. I'm looking at all those layers. When that physical information comes up, and let's say a child suggests that they need a little bit more iron in their body, or they need a
Mm.
little bit more support, they need a more well-rounded um, uh, gut flora.
Mm.
It's like who knows what they come up with all
Right.
kinds of things. But what they have also said is it's not just the product that we offer them, that we give them, or the technique that we offer them. It's also the consciousness with which that was created.
Mm. Right.
So
Yeah.
here's where it's like, again, we're more open, we're more sensitive, we're feeling um, more of the information that's being imprinted. So, you can give a child two different, you know, uh, vitamin D supplements. One of those vitamin D supplements is not even really what it's supposed to be, and
Mm.
the company might be interested in just turning a profit, and it's really not what it says it is. That's going to have more of a negative impact on that child because they're not just picking up the physicality of it, but also from the other side, if you've got products like I know that you've talked to me about in the
Mhm.
past, where you've got that supply chain, where you've got the people that are creating it and why they're creating it. Some of these mom and pop shops that have created different food or different supports, different oils, different whatever.
Mm.
And they create it from a place of, hey, this helped my child. And I really want that to go out into the world and help all these other kids. That's going to have more of a positive impact because of the consciousness with which it was created.
Yes. I think this is a very powerful point because a bad product can become very good because it could end up carrying those positive energies,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, and this becomes actually an incredible challenge for us as we try to get people away from the bad products. Because
Yes.
because as we have a person with great intention doing something, and it's
Yes.
their intention,
Yes.
right, that is really having such an impact. But we can ramp that up even more if we get a better source for them to deal with. So,
Yes. And in the
mm.
meantime, again, just hearing this from the kids, we have no idea how powerful we actually are.
Right.
And I think that, say you do, I mean, I have a gazillion supplements that I've bought, over
Mm.
time. Some of them are great, some of them are not. But there's two things that the kids said. They said, bless or empower, whatever words you
Mhm.
want to use, that energy, because especially as a parent of one of these children, right? Guess what? You have you have the power of your intent. You love this child. And if
Right.
you're blessing that supplement so it can be the best it can be for that child, they're picking up that energy,
Yes. Yes.
right? So
Hmm.
the other thing that they would say, or they have said often, is bless it and also invite that supplement to work for you. Because again, we're
Ah,
always taking a supplement thinking that something's wrong with us and we got to fix it.
right.
But say, okay, I've got this supplement. I'm inviting this supplement to support my body. I'm
Nice.
inviting it to do whatever it can do, right?
Hmm.
I've had kids that lived in in homes or were not living with their parents, and the parents would come to see them, and I'd say, well, if your parents can do anything for you when they come, you know, other than, make that connection, have that heart open, spend time together.
Mm.
What else? And they always say, bring food that's been blessed.
Wow, that's so nice.
Yeah, bring food that holds their energy of intent. It's
Mm.
huge.
Yes. And again, I just want to add, Susie, that we can scientifically measure the
Right.
impacts of this. This is real. It's tangible. It is
Yes.
not woo-woo. We are decades past that already.
Yeah.
And it is. I mean, I can't even emphasize enough how important it is. It's one of the reasons why I've been very eager to try to do a video with you because we had such a great conversation last time. And I really wanted to get you to say all of these things, on
Yeah.
video for some of my clients to hear, because um, of course, for me, I can always just point people to your website, and you've got lots of great videos, great books. So you're out there, but it always helps a little more if I can make it a little bit more personal,
Yes.
because it's because here I am, I'm saying the same things, and
Hmm.
now people can hear me saying these things with you, and that we
Yeah.
are in agreement on all this. And I can't emphasize enough how powerful it is, all these things that you've been saying, and how real, how tangible they are. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing all of this. It's just,
Yeah. I worked with a physicist from Stanford,
hmm,
Dr. William Tiller, for several years. And we created something. He's passed now, and
hmm,
he just like such an amazing mentor. But he was the department chair at Stanford at one point, and he was material science. And what when I met him, he had 40 years under his belt, maybe 50 years by that point, of working with intention. And he had done all kinds of experiments around just our intention. And to me, that's like a broadcast of energy, right? We have
mm,
a clear,
yes,
coherent intention. And he had raised the pH of water. He had changed all kinds of things just by intention and broadcasting from a distance. So when I met him, we decided to create an intention for families of kids diagnosed on the spectrum. And because I had a connection to the kids, I just asked them, what's the intention? And
mm,
he said there actually has to be two. For us, it has to be, we want that intention to be integration. For the parents, we want the intention to be almost like a de-stressing of the situation, because if you're always 24/7 in a stressful situation, even if something starts to positively change, you may not notice it.
mm,
So they wanted both. So we set up this broadcast. We had probably, well, over time, we had several families. I think in the first broadcast, there was maybe 60 families.
oh wow,
Some people in Australia, I mean, they were all over the world. They were
nice.
people that I had been working with for some time, so they had some awareness of these concepts. But we were basically set an intention, and then that intentions was broadcast through a computer. It was just scrolled through a computer, sent to a specific address,
Oh
just an
wow,
intention. We had kids, I think the youngest child was like 3. The oldest child was probably in her 40s, you know.
oh,
And and in every case, there was transformation that happened just because we were constantly broadcasting into their environment something that was supportive of their integration,
mm,
something that was supportive. The parents had to fill out forms every month so that we could see what growth was happening for the children and also how their mental well-being, their health and well-being were.
mm.
And so both of those were coming through. But what was so fascinating is like we had one little girl, she spoke 20 new words on the first day.
Wow,
I mean, had
wow,
she had like minimal words. We also, and with my speech pathology hat on, because that's what I was prior to integration specialist, I would tell you through that mindset that if a child's not verbally communicating by the time they're 7, or
Mhm.
so, they're probably not going to. That was through that particular lens.
Mm.
We had kids that were 16 years old that started picking up words, or kids that were non-speakers that went to. That's why when I say now to people, we can be that broadcast. We can be that intention that is set out. And of course, when we first set it out, our minds are going, that doesn't, no, that's not going to happen. That doesn't work, you know. But if we stay with it, if again, consistency, if
Right.
we stay with it, then guess what? All of a sudden, we've created a different energetic environment.
Yes.
And these kids are so tuned in to energy that why not, start broadcasting that and see what happens.
Right.
So I loved working with Bill Tiller. I mean, I just, in so many ways, I mean, he was a father figure to me in many
Mm.
ways, as well as a scientist that I work with. But any time that we fail to really understand that we are these intention creating devices, we are,
Absolutely.
and we can decide what we're going to
Absolutely.
put out there. Um, and who knows what can happen because we do. And especially like in this energetic climate where you've got so many people asking questions about these kids, I'm absolutely convinced that just like many of these kids, they've always been telepathic, right?
Hmm.
Humanity just opened up to that, which is great and amazing. But if there were forerunners before that were telepathic, and we're doing all this, and now humanity is open to that. Maybe there are forerunners that are ready to be more fully integrated,
Mm.
and then humanity will open up to that. So
Yes. Yes.
we'll
I think
just see.
so.
Yeah.
I think, we definitely have a long way to go because, of course, for most of the autistic children or their parents and caretakers that might see this video, they're probably still coming across teachers and doctors that say, no, no,
Yes.
no, that's a myth, you know.
Yeah.
But of course, it's changing so rapidly, right?
Right.
So we're educating and waking up so many people so fast, thanks to you, Susie. Thanks to things like the telepathy tapes.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to give a shout out to the remarkable life of Evelyn, which is a
Hmm.
documentary on Netflix, I think,
Oh,
right now.
yeah.
The fantastic story showing about how computer gaming was so instrumental in helping some people connect. And
Yeah.
anyway, people should check that out too.
Yeah.
But there's so many things. Like again, I know you and I spoke about other things too, which there's just not enough time to mention it all. But as you are saying, I mean, it's happening. Humanity is shifting.
Mhm.
People are waking up. And we just have to stay positive and change our perspective about how we look at autistic children and how we approach them. And
Yeah.
yeah, remarkable things are happening every day.
I think with the bigger conversation too, again, we go back to there's more question marks. And I think also something that's really positive is in the past, and I'm not saying it doesn't still happen because it does, but I think it was more prevalent. In the past, a person would get a diagnosis of autism and they would be told all of the things that their child would never do.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
that's an imprint, right?
Right,
That's a
right.
vibrational imprint.
Hmm.
And even if that still happens, Victor, and I just will say this to the parents listening, even if that still happens, when you step out of that experience with that doctor or that therapist or whoever told you that, again, can we put a question mark around that? Can we just open ourselves back up to actually what might be possible, right?
Hmm.
Instead of what some authority figure just said is impossible.
Right.
Because I'll tell you, with all these different people that, you read books about kids who became mathematical geniuses or savants or had that skill all along, but nobody could see it,
Mm-hmm.
in their preschool or it's those parents and professionals that say, I don't know what else to believe, but I'm going to believe that there are possibilities beyond what some authority figure said. I think the more that we just put a little question mark in that mix,
Mm.
the the more something can show up. And then all of a sudden, we have access to something like the telepathy tapes, or,
Mm,
we're sitting in front of people like you and I and having a broader conversation. Once people dip into that, they're going to keep experiencing that road instead of
right,
the road that said nothing was possible. Yeah.
right, right.
So,
Yeah, yeah, it's
yeah.
wonderful. We are in such exciting times.
Yeah, we are.
It really is, and I just want more people to understand that. So thank you for speaking with me today, Suzy Miller, and I look forward to speaking with you again. Everyone, be sure to check her out at www.suzymiller.com.